Welcome back to Worst Seats in the House. Michael Russo, Anthony LaPanta, Anthony and Margot and Ariana all back from a long weekend in Denver visiting family. I am leaving for the Stanley Cup Final on Monday for Edmonton, and we figured we'd get out a pod face-to-face, Anthony, not while you were running around the lake or the water or whatever the heck you were running around in Tampa.
Just walking along the waterfront in Tampa, but yeah, it's good to have a chance to chat in person. It's been a while.
Yeah, I haven't seen you in a while. I am looking forward to the Eastern Conference Final. We will start
the Stanley Cup Final.
Yeah. Oh, did I say that? Yeah. All right, I'm back.
If you're looking forward to the Eastern Conference Final, you got a ways to wait.
Florida versus Edmonton. We're going to talk about that on later in the pod. But last week we made people wait about 30 minutes before we talked about the Minnesota Wild. So let's start this pod by talking about the Wild. And by the way, we will have one live show this month, and that will probably be sometime around June 23rd or the 25th, around then, when I'm right before the draft, right before free agency, back when I'm at from the quote Stanley Cup Final. Wrote a story today about Marco Rossi. Anthony, I talked to Bill Guerin, I talked to Ian Pulver, which is Rossi's agent, and a lot of times in negotiations, obviously, sometimes they're difficult. They always are. We saw with Kirill Kaprizov, we've seen it through the history of time. It's not easy sometimes to get negotiations done. A lot of times they work out. This one, there is quite the schism in terms of where one side values Marco in terms of a contract versus the other. One are going strictly on comparables and where Marco would land in those comparables, and they probably are very much right. 6'5", 7'5", whatever you want to come down to. In Minnesota's point of view, there's only a price point that they're willing to go based on what they also believe he is, what he's going to be, where he will be in their lineup in the future. And I don't know how that bridge is going to be gapped in such a short time when we know that starting July 1, he is a restricted free agent that can sign an offer sheet somewhere else, but isn't arbitration eligible, which means that if the Wild took him to arbitration, they could maybe get a 1 or 2 year term and it's done, but he is not eligible for arbitration. So that offer sheet is looming, and it's something that his agents can shop, and most likely in a league where everybody's always looking for quality young centers is going to get. I think that this is probably maybe the beginning of the end.
It could be, but we've talked. I don't know what somebody else would be willing to pay him on an offer sheet. I don't think it's a no-brainer that there's another team out there that would say, okay, we'll give you a 7x7 deal. Maybe there is, but to me, he seems like somewhere in between, where if you were a contender, I don't think you'd look at Marco Rossi right now as the last piece of the puzzle. And if you're a team at the bottom, would you be willing to let your compensation be draft picks that could potentially be really high in the first round for a player that you'd still have to pay 7x7? I just don't know if there's a no-brainer fit out there where he's going to get the deal that he thinks he's worth. Not even to say that their comparables are inaccurate, but I just don't know if it's a no-brainer that somebody will offer him that. Maybe on a shorter-term deal, but I don't think there'd be somebody saying, let's give the guy 7x7.
I'm just more saying that that's a pressure point that could force a trade.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, and to your point, sometimes you'd almost rather make the trade if you're one of those teams that then still pay him the money. And I do think there's going to be a lot of teams out there that want him. You start looking at it is a supply and demand thing. There's not a lot of centers out there definitely not in free agency, unrestricted free agency. And it's not often that young centers like this just hit the open market. He did have 24 goals and 60 points at age 23 this year in his second full season. He's only going to continue to get better. You could debate all you want whether or not he could be the final piece of a Stanley Cup, but I do think that there's a lot of teams out there that need those type of players. And, I just covered a team in Carolina that could very much use a Marco Rossi. Philadelphia is a team that's rumored to be interested in him. I do think that makes a lot of sense. Vancouver is a team that I think makes a lot of sense. Calgary, Montreal. There's just, you can go on and on of teams that would be looking for a number 2/3 center.
There's teams for sure where he'd be a good player and be a good fit, but I just don't know if you're those teams. Number one, you'd have to pay him what he's asking, essentially what he's asking for here, because if you offer him less, the Wild could match. Mm-hmm. So you'd have to find, first of all, a team willing to pay him that, but then willing to say at that number, the compensation is high.
Right. I'm just saying,
if it's $7 million, isn't it a 1 and a 3?
Yeah, it is. But it would. I'm saying more so that a team would trade for him, and then that team would pay him, and then the question is, what kind of trade do you get? And if I'm Bill Guerin, I'm trying to. I mean, the one thing here that concerns me is what have they done to his trade value by putting him in this position, making it very clear that they don't want to pay him a certain price point, making sure that the belief out there is that a team that's long needed centers, there's got to be a reason why they're willing to trade him. I mean, that stuff is real, and you just wonder what teams are going to be willing to give up for him. On your point on the first and third, he would have to make 7.02 on an offer sheet.
7 by 7 essentially would put that at a first and a third.
Higher. But in a trade, that's very different. You could try for a roster player. You could try for a pick and a prospect. You could try for a good player and a pick. One report that was out there this week by Daily Faceoff was Forrester and a late first. That seems light to me. Although Philadelphia and Bill Guerin, for the record, did deny that. But again, that's Bill Guerin denying it. I'm not sitting there trying to disparage somebody else's sources. And Forrester is somebody that they absolutely love in Philadelphia. They just signed him to a new 2-year deal, probably because they couldn't work out a longer-term deal. They love him as a middle six guy. If the Wild asked for Forrester or a late first, that seems really late. The late first. I mean, you're trading a 9th overall pick coming off 60-point season. It better be better than a late first.
And he's 4 years down the road in his development.
Absolutely.
You're taking a player now that you'd be waiting 4 years, hoping that he turns into Marco Rossi. I don't make that deal if that's the return. There's always, every negotiation is always contentious at some point, just about all of them. And this one maybe has gotten more so than we would have guessed it was going to. That doesn't mean that the sides still can't resolve the issue.
Yep.
But maybe it happens after you go see what else people are willing to offer you on an offer sheet. I don't know when that timing might be, but it wouldn't shock me if somehow, some way, maybe it's a really short bridge deal. We've always talked about that, hey, 5 by 5 seems to make sense. Well, maybe it's a 2 or a 3 year deal, and I
can tell you right now, he is not signing a bridge deal. I mean, So,
but his only leverage to
that,
sign a bridge deal is if he knows somebody else is willing to give him a longer term deal and an RFA.
But at this point, he might just want to leave. I mean, that would not shock me the way that things came together here down the stretch, because he's the one living this. It wasn't just the playoffs. I think he felt this coming all year long, and I just don't think that right now there's a lot of trust there. If he signs, the whole point, and we've talked this about the nth degree, the whole point of a bridge deal is that you as a player are betting on yourself, that you're going to be able in the term of that contract, prove yourself that you are that $7 or $8 million player. But after playing 11 minutes a night in the playoffs and in his mind seeing what the organization thinks about him, I don't think he's going to trust signing a 2 or 3 year deal and risk the fact that in the term of that contract they're going to play him third and fourth lines, not top power play. It would hurt his production, and then he wouldn't get that home run contract. So I think that's flown. The way it's worked here is the Wild originally offered him the 5x5. That is fact, according to multiple sources. And then they did counter with a shorter term bridge deal at a higher AAV. The Wild did not accept that. And then the playoffs happen. Things very much change. They have a meeting last week. The Wild offer him a bridge deal. They have not countered yet, and I think that they're going to counter on something higher in terms. But I just think that the way this is going is probably going to end with some sort of divorce here, and sooner than later. Because the one thing that Bill Guerin said to me, and this was just in general, not necessarily just about Marco, is that there's a lot of people in this league that just think that you can only make trades around the draft. But if the right deal comes along for anybody, Marco or somebody else that he feels it's time to pull the trigger, he's not going to wait for some artificial deadline and try to work it up. He would make the move. And we've seen Billy make these type of trades before. As you've pointed out multiple times on this pod, Kevin Fiala is a player that everybody in the league knew that he had to trade, and he somehow got Brock Faber and a first-round pick for it. A good example is Jack McBain. McBain could have signed with Arizona as an unrestricted free agent when he didn't sign here, and he still somehow got a second-round pick for him. So Billy has worked his magic before in terms of making trades. The question is, are you getting some package back that is going to be at some point better than Marco Rossi? And if it's not now, then do you react? Do you do that knowing that you have something else in the back burner that is going to replace Marco in the lineup?
Yeah, and that's certainly, well, there's no doubt that they've got that in the back of their mind. The replacement doesn't necessarily, the trade could bring a different kind of commodity. The replacement in the lineup could come elsewhere. But you definitely do not want to undersell or sell low on a player like Rossi, because he's 23. He scored 60 points in his second full season in the NHL. And the point you made about where he's going to be in the lineup, he isn't going to be on the top power play in all likelihood with the personnel this team has right now. He isn't going to supplant one of those guys on a regular basis. That doesn't necessarily mean that things couldn't change at some point during the term of a contract, but next year he's got to know going in he isn't going to be in there. He's not going to take Kaprizov or Boldy or Eriksson Ek's spot on that. He just isn't. That's a
Zuccarello
fact. And then whoever's on the top, whether it be Bouillon or Faber or a fifth forward, whatever it is. But
Marcus Johansson?
I doubt it.
Actually, you're saying this. I do want to interrupt, because people that are listening to this pod know this by now, but you do not, because I know you don't read me. But I did report today the Wild are going to be re-signing Marcus Johansson.
And I would, if it's at the same value.
But he won't be on the number one
unit.
But
if it's at the same price that he's been, I've always been like, that's what he's worth. Yeah. If you get Marcus Johansson for $1 million, $1.5 million, I'd pay him $1 million for sure. But anyway, just to go back to Marco, I just fear that he might be overreacting to his playing time in the playoffs. And whether it's you want to take what some of the Wild statements were about him at face value or not, the reality is what they said was true. Ryan Hartman outplayed him, and therefore he played. Now, should he have played more than Freddie Gaudreau or in that role? That's debatable, and that's a case you can argue. But Ryan Hartman played better than him and deserved to be where he was in the lineup more than Rossi did. And that doesn't mean that it's an organization giving up on Rossi. It just means that for a 6-game stretch, a guy on whom they had leaned heavily all year, played nearly 20 minutes a night all year, in those 6 games played less because Ryan Hartman played great.
Yeah, and when it comes down to it, they don't make contract offers at all if they don't like him. It's just they like him in a certain spot or a certain price point. They think he's a $5 million player. He thinks he's a $7 million player. And can you bridge that gap? The clock is ticking. Marcus Johansson, as I mentioned, the one thing, and I know you're going to love this question, but when you bring him back, it does suddenly take a roster spot. And does that now hurt a chance for Liam Ogren to make the team, or a Riley Heidt or a Hunter Hayde or somebody? At some point you do have to let these kids have a chance to play. And now you come into the season, and we know that sometimes when you what you have sometimes is a lot of times what a coach trusts. And if they trust Marcus Johansson, sometimes that could really rule the roost.
It can, but I would also, as I've said all along, is if Ogren wants his spot, then take it. And if Ogren doesn't play better than Marcus Johansson next year, then I think you've got a team that is ready to contend. And if contending, you have a better chance with Marcus Johansson than you do with Liam Ogren, so be it. And if Ogren outplays him, which I think I think even if the Wild are signing him, they would still be hoping that Liam Ogren outplays him.
Right.
And that Marcus Johansson becomes a fourth line player at $1 million or whatever the number is. And he could be a really valuable fourth line player because of the fact that if somebody goes down in the top 9, he's proven that he can play up there. And he proved in the playoffs that I thought his playoffs were some of the better games that he played throughout the season. And if Ogren outplays him, now you've got a win-win situation. And if Ogren comes to camp and doesn't outperform him, doesn't in a no-brainer way take that spot, then that's the way it is.
Yeah. I think in the dream world, the Wild would love to trade Rossi straight up for J.J. Peterka, then give Peterka that $7 million plus deal. I think they believe that he could be that player. Peterka, though, he's not been playing center there. He's been playing wing. I think he's a heck of a player. The question is he a better player than Marco Rossi? I think it makes sense, that type of trade, if you're getting a really quality center in some other capacity, whether that's free agency, whether that's a trade, whether that's Dylan or Urov. It's going to be really interesting. Back to Marcus Johansson. I guess the one thing for him is, where do you put him in the lineup? Like, I just think that if you really truly want to be a contender, Anthony, you need much better production from a top 6 winger than Marcus gave you last year at 34 points.
Yeah, well, I don't think that you'd be looking at him as a top 6 guy.
Sure hope not.
I think you're looking at him as a fourth line winger, but a fourth line winger that in a spot where somebody's banged up, or even on a night where somebody's just not going, that you could throw him up there. He proved he can still skate. His compete level in the playoffs, I thought, was terrific. That's what I'm saying, is that I think if you look at him and you get him for $1 million or $1.5 million or something and put him on the fourth line, I think that's and even if he ends up being your 13th guy, that's still worth it.
I have a thought that's been in my head for a while that I want to throw at you after the break. We'll be right back on Worst Seats in the House. Do you want spotless dishes, softer laundry, and better tasting water straight from the tap? Well, you can get all of that with the Connecticut water treatment system from Aquarius Home Services. You can have worry-free water throughout your home for less than the cost of my daily coffee habit, and trust me, that's a lot. For a limited time, you could save up to 25% on a new Connecticut system. Plus, get a free water analysis. How do you do all of this? Well, go to AquariusHomeservices.com for details. That's AquariusHomeservices.com. Aquarius, earning the right to be recommended, and don't forget to mention that Russo sent you.
Deer hunting season is here, and it's time to own your odds with OnX Hunt, the GPS hunting app trusted by millions of hunters. With the Hunt app, you'll have access to nationwide public and private land ownership information, waypoints, tracks, and much more, all at your fingertips. Go to onxmaps.com/hunt. That's onxmaps.com/hunt to sign up today.
Back here, Worst Seats in the House, Michael Russo, Anthony LaPanta. Kirill Kaprizov, penalty kill. Would you do it? And here's my recent rationale. Every good team in the league right now is playing their stars in the PK. You see it in Toronto, you see it in Florida, you see it in Carolina. Connor McDavid is killing penalties right now. Like, if you're going to give him $15 million, at some point you, I think, want him to be in all situations. We know the PK is not working. We know they never score offensively on the PK, especially since they got rid of Connor Dewar and Brandon Duhaime. Is there a point? And again, I'm asking you this without asking John Hines, without asking Kirill if he's ever killed, if he'd want to kill. But it just seems to come a point where, that would be a heck. Like, we saw Boldy add a different element and dimension to the PK.
And that's the only thing I would say, is that it depends on what the makeup of the rest of the roster turns out to be. So let's just say that Marcus Johansson's in your lineup. Ryan Hartman's not going to kill. I would guess Danilo Urov's not going to kill. So now you might, Liam Ogren, I don't know that he'd be a guy that you'd look at and say, well, he's definitely a no-brainer on the kill. But if you start looking at guys like Boldy, Foligno, Eriksson Ek, Gaudreau, I mean, there's just, I don't know that if the rest of the roster is made up the way it looks like it might be, there might be a spot for Kirill. So if it were me, my guess is, and I haven't talked to Hines about this either, but I would bet that going into the start of the season, it would be, we want you doing the drills, we want you in the meetings, we want you to understand it, and then have it be just a back pocket kind of thing, where if the penalty kill's struggling again, that maybe you go that way. But I think if you're using Boldy in that role, I don't know that you want to get into where you're using both of those guys regularly, big minutes on the kill. And, it kind of depends on the way the team's going, too, because if you're in a spot where you're disciplined and you're only shorthanded once or twice a night, well, that's very different than if you're like they were a couple of years ago, where they were one of the most penalized teams in the league. So if it's more like last year, where what would that mean? 40 seconds a night on the kill? Then you could do that.
Yeah.
But if you're going to start talking about 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes a night, now you might start to see some wear and tear. You might start to see a dip in the rest of his game that I don't think they'd be willing to see.
And a lot of it could be based on schedule. If you're playing 9 and 13, you probably don't want to play Boldy and Kaprizov in every single situation. I've been thinking about this a lot lately because look, they've changed systems, they've changed coaches, they've changed everything, strategy on the PK. And there just comes a point where you just got to say, you know what, the same old penalty killers that we have long thought are meant to play the PK here, maybe they're just not good penalty killers. It's the same guys on the same that are out there all the time making the same mistakes, even the ones that we probably think should be have that PK makeup. Maybe there just needs to come a point where you just completely change the personnel. Well, I think maybe that helps with free agency if they get a Brock Nelson or something like that. I mean,
I think the one guy that is the where that question has to be answered is Yakov Trenyan, because there were some times early in the year where he was effective on the kill. And I remember they had a stretch where it looked like the kill was starting to gain traction, and a lot of it was he and Marcus Foligno disrupting zone entries at a really efficient level. And then we saw him a few weeks after that look like he was a mess on the kill. I think we saw more from Trenyan in the playoffs, not necessarily on the kill, but I'm just talking about in his game. We saw a different level of Trenyan than we had seen during the regular year, and I think maybe that's what has to be answered: is can he be a legitimate part of a decent penalty kill? I'm sure you're talking about Freddie Gaudreau, who this year I don't think was great on the kill, but I think he's proven in the past that he can be an effective kill guy, and he was good on faceoffs down the stretch this year. So I think that might be a question mark. But the other guys, I really like Foligno. I thought was good. I thought Eriksson Ek, over his career, has proven to be a very good killer. I just think they just needed this was one of those years where you probably just needed a reset, because they started slowly and it felt like they couldn't get out from under it statistically, even when the kill looked like it was more effective and passed the eye test. They just could never dig their way out of the hole they had dug early. And the kill was okay in the playoff series. It was fine. Their special teams were they didn't lose that series because they got out special team.
Yep, correct. Yeah, I don't disagree there. I just it's just one of those things. Two guys that have to get better on the kill are two of the most reliable players in the lineup, and that's Brodin and Faber. You look at their numbers, not very good on the kill. We'll be it's going to be a really interesting month for the Wild, because again, I just think with the lack of big names in free agency, the fact that Brock Nelson's not a no-brainer. Like, there's a chance Colorado re-signs him. There's going to be other teams that are surely going to be interested as well. What if they don't get Brock Nelson? Now all of a sudden you're really in trouble and better make some trades. So I just think that some surprising move, besides just Rossi, something's going to happen this month that's going to be really noteworthy in advance of free agency. One thing I did learn today from talking to Bill Guerin is the Wild do plan to tender qualifying offer for Declan Chisholm, who's a RFA. That was just one that we didn't know about. So he should be back in the lineup as well. Obviously, as we've talked about, they want Boyum and Juracek to have a chance to make the team. Bogosian is somebody that, who knows if he's back. He's got a year left on his deal. He'd be tradable, but we'll see.
But if Bogosian and Chisholm are your two extra defensemen, You
Pretty
can win
good.
with that.
Yeah, pretty good. And then we'll see. They got a lot of prospects that are going to be starting to turn pro. There's going to be some news here with Ryder Ritchie at some point here in the next couple days. I believe they got smoked in the Memorial Cup Final to London Knights. And I think that he has probably played his last game in Medicine Hat and could be transferring to a university on the East Coast of the United States. So we'll see that pretty soon as well. Trying to think, Kalen Parker, somebody that they let go today. He was a 6th round pick in 2023. Didn't tender him a bona fide offer today. Anything else that
Not Wild related. I just think it's.
Let's talk Stanley Cup Final. Then we got some really good. Some.
Yeah, let me. In fact, before we get to the finals, let
Vinny
me
has
throw a
some
couple
thoughts?
of Vinny's thoughts
Oh,
at you
man.
because his thoughts are more league related. So this will be a good segue into our talk about the Cup Finals.
Yeah.
And the first one, he says that does it make you rethink the future plan in Toronto after you watch what Florida did to Carolina, and you look and say that Toronto pushed them to a 7th game? Does it mean that you wouldn't be as feeling the urgency to blow things up in Toronto after watching just how good Florida might be?
No, I think you blow it up. It's been too long. They've devoted to this core. The reality is that in games 5 and 7 on home ice, they got smoked 6-1. That is a team that has a core that is not to be trusted. And so I'll be interested to see what happens. I think Mitch Marner's obviously going to be leaving. We'll see what happens with John Tavares. The question is, do other big things happen that cause them to make trades? I'm not suggesting that they're going to trade Austin Matthews, but I do think that everything's on the table there. I think that they've got some huge decisions to make. I'll be interested when Marner leaves, how much of that gets spent on Matty Nyes, and then who else do they go after? Does Sam Bennett want to play at home? Or does he want to stay at Florida at a quality price where he absolutely fits like a glove? I think that's most likely what he would probably want to do and forego some dollars that he could get on the open market. A lot of talk that maybe a Brad Marchand would go there. I do think Brad Marchand is probably going to be too expensive for Florida to re-sign. The question is, where does he go? Would he ever go back to Boston? Does he want to go somewhere north? One thing shooting the breeze with him during the Eastern Conference Final, he loves the cold. He loves the snow. Somebody might have told him that a good place that has snow and cold and all that stuff might be Minnesota. I might have told him that. But that could be a selfish thing. I will tell you, let me just mention something to you. I don't know if I brought this up on the last podcast, but man, it has been unreal dealing with Brad Marchand. I've never really had that.
We talked about it on last week's show a little bit.
Fans here I know that some people might roll their eyes at it if you've been watching Brad from afar and have gotten ticked off at all his antics sometimes on the ice over the years, but he is your quintessential. If he's in your lineup, you love him, and people would love the sound bites. That's for sure. Certainly the beat writer.
The other one of his other questions, he's got 3 here. This one is the Metropolitan Division just lousy, or is Florida just a wagon? And it made me think for a minute, because remember, let's go back 8-9 years. The Metro was kind of like what the Central is now, where it looked like every year the Metro would have 5 teams in the playoffs, the Atlantic would have 3, and the Metro was looked at as just an absolute grind to go through that schedule. When you were talking about the Rangers and the Capitals and the Penguins, I mean, it was. But this stuff all is cyclical, and now it is 6 years in a row that the Eastern Conference champ has come from the Atlantic Division.
Right. Yeah, I mean, first of all, everything is cyclical, but you're right. I mean, some of those teams are just lousy, and they're going to be lousy for a while. I think Philadelphia is going to work itself up, but it's not going to happen overnight. Pittsburgh, obviously, it's going to be a long time before they're good. Islanders are about to go through a rebuild. They're a slow plodding team that is aging.
Columbus is on the right track, but they're not there yet.
Yeah, Rangers certainly look like they're going to have some major changes. Devils, I think, were very disappointed, but obviously losing Jack Hughes changes the whole complexion there. And then you have Carolina and Washington. And Washington was a big surprise to a lot of people. So it sure feels like right now they are in that sort of rebuild situation. That entire
and
division.
Washington, to me, is going to be one that's interesting to watch. Can they duplicate what they did this year?
Right.
Had a little magic with all the Ovechkin energy and everything.
100%.
Can they do that again? All right, his last thought is, if you're the Dallas front office, what would you do differently? Is it a style of play issue? When they don't get power plays, they lose. And, I mean, there's 3 years in a row they've been to the conference finals, and 3 years in a row they've come up short. And the last two against the same Edmonton club.
Yeah, I was shocked at that series because I think going into that series, I think everybody would said if you had a depth scoring issue, it would probably be Edmonton more so than Dallas. But it turned out that Edmonton was just okay at those times when Draisaitl and McDavid weren't on the ice, and then McDavid decided to become McDavid. They're scoring a ton. To Dallas, very disappointing. Wyatt Johnston had a terrible playoff. Jason Robertson had a really tough playoff until the last round. And Mikko Rantanen, other than a 4 or 5 game stretch against Colorado, absolutely. I mean, he get 8 or 9 games in a row to end the playoffs without a goal.
Point, yep.
Jamie Benn was brutal in the playoffs, and I know that Jim Nill has said that he can't imagine ever having that roster with Jamie Benn in the NHL and not there. But I mean, does this change things? And then you have Pete DeBoer throwing his goaltender under the bus in an unbelievable fashion there, by pulling him, but then going after him and putting it on record for everybody to know, especially next year if they play Edmonton, that he's lost 6 of 7 games in the playoffs against the Oilers. So tough times in that market right now.
For sure. And you mentioned the depth scoring. The other spot where you would have guessed Dallas had the edge was in goal, and then for sure on the blue line. And I still can't figure it out. I mean, John Klingberg's playing almost 20 minutes a night in playoffs.
He's got a new hip.
And this, like, you would have never in a million years said, oh, you're going to lean on him for 20 minutes a night? I mean, Jake Wallman's playing 20 minutes a night.
Kulak.
And Kulak's playing over 20 a night.
Yeah.
I mean, these guys are guys that third pair at best throughout, even if they could stay in lineups over the last couple seasons, and yet they're getting great production out of them. Stetcher was great when he filled in. I mean, they've been a lot better than I would have expected them to. And I think we talked about this a little bit last week. When you look back, if Quentin Byfield chips a puck off the glass in Game 4, I think Edmonton's out in round 1, and yet here they are in the Stanley Cup Finals, and they'll have a legitimate chance in this series.
It is amazing how just one little tiny play, the little things in hockey, could hurt you. I mean, Buchnevich in Winnipeg, the same thing, ices the puck, and then next thing you know, they score with like a second left because of it. Gus Nyquist offside. We don't have to tell Wild fans what the little things mean. The Wild might be still playing. Maybe that's a little hyperbole, but I think probably win that series.
Win the series.
Yeah, if he's not offside there. So, I don't know if I'd be in panic mode in Dallas, but I think they have to take a real hard look and autopsy that series and figure out how they are going to score more.
It's kind of like the way Colorado talked after their series with Dallas, where they said, look, this is 2 years in a row where they've knocked us out, and this time they didn't have their best defenseman and one of their best forwards, and I don't know where we go from here. And those were what the Avalanche players were saying after they lost to Dallas. And if you're Dallas, I thought going into the season, and I've said it many times on this show, I thought they had the best constructed roster in the West. And then they made a couple of key additions that Kyle Granlund was great for them.
Yep.
And couldn't have been better. And yet it still wasn't enough to push them into the final. So that's why this is such a crapshoot when we've talked about is the Wild plan like what makes it a success? Do they have to win it all? And this is exactly my point, is that you could have a team that looks like it's built perfectly and built for that, and yet they've fallen short now 3 years in a row. It doesn't mean their plan was a failure. It just means they ran into the wrong teams at the wrong time. And that's where I think Minnesota's going to be the next 3 or 4 years. I think the way their roster's set up, they're going to be in the mix. But now it has to be the year where you get Stuart Skinner playing out of his mind for a couple weeks, that you get that break. You get the the other team not chipping a puck out of the zone when they have a chance to clinch it. That go back to the Marchand breakaway that year, Boston against Florida. That ends that series. He gets stopped on the breakaway. Florida wins 3 games in a row and ends up making a run all the way in the playoffs. So those kind of things, it's fickle. And it's close, and it's razor thin, the margin between the teams that make those runs and don't.
But I do think the 2 best teams in the National Hockey League are in the Stanley Cup Final, and probably for the second year in a row.
Well, the 2 best that were right now.
Yeah.
I mean, these have been the best 2 in the playoffs. I don't think I'd say that Edmonton was one of the best 2 teams in the league.
I just think that if you are a team that's built for the playoffs, it's just a matter of just getting in. And I think the regular season.
But would you have said this team was built for the playoffs with those guys we talked about on the blue line?
But I will say, I think what Stan Bowman has done there, and which is again ironic considering that people thought that when they lost Broberg and Holloway last year that they hurt their depth. But if you actually look overall, especially up front, I think that their depth is a lot greater than it used to be. I think they're a better team than last year. And you're right. I mean, the way they're defending right now. I mean, you look at the third period of their last several games. They don't give up chances.
Right.
They are a different team.
They are for sure.
Yep.
And I'm not saying that I think in the playoffs they have been one of the best 2 teams. But I'm saying going into the playoffs, you would have never said the team that's going to be the hardest to score against down the stretch in games is going to be the one playing Brett Kulak and Jake Wallman and John Klingberg 20 minutes a night.
Or a number 1 goaltender that lost his job.
Right. He's not even playing if Pickard doesn't get hurt.
Right. And Pickard's 6-0 and can't even get back in the lineup. So it's pretty. It's fascinating. But I just think that what Florida and Edmonton have shown is that if you're good enough and you've got the best couple players and those guys are all top heavy, that once you get into the playoffs, that's really all that matters. That the regular season is just really sometimes you get bored with it. For some teams like the Wild, who barely made the playoffs, the regular season's everything. But some teams it's just get in and then figure it out. I mean, look at Florida and Edmonton. Both these teams have not had. Look at Florida. They haven't had a home ice advantage at all in any of the series and won't in round 4. Let's talk about the series a little bit, Anthony. First of all, Zach Hyman obviously breaks his wrist, has surgery, is done for the playoffs. That is a significant loss for that team.
It is.
Absolutely. I mean, Jeff Skinner scored a big goal. First of his playoff career the other night, but he's not Zach Hyman.
Hyman's been great for them. That will be a big loss. And I think having a couple extra days here between the start of these series probably favors Edmonton. I'd imagine we're going to see them really lean on their stars in this series. I would bet that when it's done, we're going to be talking about minutes for Draisaitl, McDavid that are going to be 25, 26 a night if needed. And that I think it's right now it's lean on these guys, play every minute they're capable of playing, and if they go down, it's going to be going down with those guys on the ice.
Last year, if you remember, I mean, they almost came back and won that series after falling down 3-rip, but one big difference is Draisaitl was hurt in that series and played hurt, where right now he is, as far as we know, extremely healthy. They are getting scoring from everywhere. McDavid's got another 20-point playoff, probably if they win, looking at Conn Smythe again. Let's talk about Florida. Again, top heavy. The ultimate consummate captain in Sasha Barkov makes the unbelievable play.
Incredible play.
I mean, just incredible play. What was unbelievable about that pass is that when he makes the pass, Verhaeghe's behind the net, but Verhaeghe knows how to get to that spot. That guy is unreal. Obviously, Reinhart, they've got to make sure that they get him healthy here in this week. He is practicing. Luostarinen was hurt in Game 5 in Carolina. He has not practiced yet, but has been skating. A.G. Greer seems like the one question mark. Lundell also missed practice yesterday. But you look at that Verhaeghe, Bennett, and Tkachuk line, as good as it gets in the league, like the Bash brothers. And then you have Evan Rodriguez there with Sasha Barkov on that line as well with Reinhart. I mean, that is a really, really good line, and then one of the best third lines around in Marchand, Luostarinen, and Lundell.
Yeah, I think Florida wins the series, and the more you watch Barkov during these playoff runs, the more you realize just how incredible a player he is. Yep. All around, great leader. All the little things that he does on a nightly basis, and so consistent. Just every single night, you can count on him. He's a heck of a player.
Guess how many even strength goals? I put this note in my story that I wrote with Jazz Smith tomorrow. How many even strength goals he's been on the ice for in the last 3 playoffs?
Even strength goals against?
Yeah,
not many.
4.
Yeah, that's
crazy.
It's unbelievable.
So non-empty net goals.
Yep.
He's just ridiculous.
And that's playing against the best.
Yeah.
Almost every night.
Absolutely. Verhaeghe always figures out a way, gets his 3rd series clinching goal. And as I mentioned, that Lundell line as good as it gets. And then their blue line. I mean, Ekblad and Forsling, outstanding. Seth Jones has been tremendous playing with Niko Mikkola, who has turned himself into an absolute stud this postseason. And then you have a third pair with Kulikov and Nate Schmidt, who might win a cup, who's after not winning the one in Vegas in 18.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things I wanted to ask you about, we talked last week glowingly about Paul Maurice. What did you think of his comments after the
what's funny
game?
is I tweeted when it was going on what I thought was going on, because it was a question that I asked him about Brad Marchand earlier that playoff round, where he just volunteered this thing with Craig Berube, and that he and Craig Berube had this arrangement that they weren't going to be on the ice. I didn't like the timing, the way that he did it. I just don't think that if you're not going to plan this in advance with Rod Brind'Amour, to now pull that after he just lost the Eastern Conference Final right there on the ice and surprise him, I just think is sort of grandstanding.
I thought so too.
Yeah.
It was exactly what I thought. And you can agree with him or disagree with him on whether or not coaches belong there, but the time to have that conversation is not during the playoffs.
Yeah.
Have that conversation even after the season.
Yeah.
Make your statement after the season, and then say, you know what, I think next year we as coaches should all agree to do it this way.
And I don't disagree with him. Like, I think it's like the last thing the losing team wants to sit there is shake a bunch of assistant coaches' hands that they'd have no idea. And the other thing is
which is exactly the point he made. Yeah. But at the same time, this is not the point to be the philosopher and stand up at the podium and say this. I didn't think. I thought it was. That's a conversation that should be had after the season, and have it with other coaches if you want, and say, hey guys, this is what I believe. What do you guys think? And if the other coaches disagree, you're not the one that gets to make that decision.
Yeah.
And so what if Brind'Amour had just said, you know what, I believe in the hockey tradition that I shake hands, and he goes back to the end of the line and just shakes hands. I mean, that would have been just as awkward going the other way. So I didn't like the timing of it at all.
Yeah. And Pete DeBoer, it was very interesting. Chris Knoblauch shook hands of the Dallas Stars. Pete DeBoer did not, and we know that DeBoer and Maurice are as close as it can be as far as opposing coaches in the league, best buddies dating back to juniors. So that was clearly something they talked about. And what was really interesting, and this is going to probably come out really bad, but when I actually started to totally agree with Paul Maurice when he actually volunteered this to me in that Marchand question, is he said this the day after the Dallas Stars beat the Winnipeg Jets. And if you remember, Pete DeBoer was mic'd. And when he
stopped and talked to
Scheifele and said something like, your dad would be so proud of you. At that point, Scheifele, after he just shook 20 guys' hands, it just came across weird. And when Maurice said it, I'm like, that's actually a good point. Why should these players are the ones that are in the battle? They should shake each other's hands, get off the ice. One team celebrates together as a team. The other team goes off and gets with their teammates in the locker room. But to go shake, the video coach's hands and the third or fourth assistant's hands, it is a little weird. So I don't disagree with him. It's just the way that he went about it. Let's take a quick break.
And I want to tell you about Twill in the Edina Galleria. Scott Dayton's Twill in the Edina Galleria. TwillMN.com is the website. I'm wearing my Johnny O hat. I'm wearing one of my many Peter Millar shirts. Johnny O and Peter Millar are two of my favorite brands out of Twill in the Edina Galleria. When I've been going to Wolves games lately, I've been wearing my Dingman shoes. I've been wearing my Brax pants, my either Peter Millar or Johnny O shirts, pullovers. The Wolves games are weird because they're really cold, and then they turn on the fire jets before the game and singe your eyebrows. You need to be prepared for all kinds of different temperatures in that building. And I just use all my Twill stuff. And as we do more shows here at TalkNorth.com on video, I'll be wearing more Twill stuff because it's really simple. I don't always try to look good. Sometimes I'm very happy being a slob, and I wear old sweats and T-shirts. If I'm trying to look presentable in any way, Talk North meetings, sponsor meetings, big games, going out in public, going out to dinner. I just put on something I bought at Twill. It's just that simple. If I put on something I bought at Twill, I'm going to look good. I'm playing a Randy Shavers golf tournament on Monday. I'm going to wear Twill stuff to that too. Golf, walk around town, dinner, whatever. TwillMN.com. Go to Twill in the Edina Galleria. They're laid back. They love talking sports. They're nice people. Tell them we sent you. You'll have a good time, and you'll end up walking out with something great.
If you're looking for a refreshing THC drink, well, check out Giggly. It tastes like your favorite cocktail with no aftertaste and just pure, bold flavor. It's made with real fruit juice and all natural ingredients. It's a Minnesota-made gem. You can find it at liquor stores and Quick Trip locations across Minnesota, or get it shipped nationwide. Plus, with a new low pricing and low-calorie options, it's the perfect guilt-free sip. Try Giggly today. Back here, worst seats in the house. Michael Russo, Anthony LaPanta. Final segment of the show. Again, we'll have a live show later this month at Tuttle's, Elsie's, or Split Rocks. And let's go to some questions, Anthony. By the way, I did talk to Bill Guerin today about the USA Hockey Championship at the World Championships and how much guys like Tage Thompson and Clayton Keller and those players really impressed him. And he's looking forward to some very, very tough decisions coming up for the Olympics. Yeah, he will. And he said, though, that it's a good problem to have. You would rather more guys choose from than less. But Tage Thompson, Clayton Keller, absolutely on the radar right now. And that brings me to the first question from Marvin. Asks, what would it take to get a guy like Tage Thompson? Who would you want the Wild to trade? I think that Tage Thompson is going to at some point be available if the Buffalo Sabres continue to stink. I think there's a lot of guys on that team, not just JJ Peterka, that might want a change of scenery, but I think there are some significant players on that team that at the end of the year met with management and basically said, like, look, if this doesn't change, it's time. And Tage, I don't think that they want to get better too, right? I don't think that now is probably the time that they want to maybe move him, but I'm not saying that eventually he's not, which is why, again, I don't think if you're the Wild that you just go out and aimlessly spend because we've all been waiting for this day for them to spend. I think you still have to be very cognizant of wasting money this offseason and hoping then in a year or two when the cap really skyrockets that you can actually go and get significant players rather than overspending for somebody that's not available right now. And
even if it's in a trade where it's just a player that's a little more expensive. I don't have any idea what's happening in Buffalo. And this is a team that has been lumped with Detroit, with Ottawa, maybe with Columbus, but more with those Eastern teams, Ottawa, Detroit, where it's this is the year, they're going to take the step, and Buffalo just never has. I can't imagine a situation where if you were going to try and overhaul the roster that you wouldn't look at it and say Tage Thompson should be right in the middle of it. But you never know. If it means
they've traded a lot of good players.
They have. And if it means that you get so much in return that you can accelerate your rebuilding process by picking up 3 or 4 commodities for him, maybe it's something you have to consider. I don't know. It just seems hard to imagine if you were Buffalo saying, all right, we think we might be a year or 2 years away. If that's the case, he's definitely a part of it.
Anthony asks, not you, and I've gotten a lot of this lately. Guys like Matty Beniers and Jared McCann, if you'd be interested in them as trades. I am not a Matty Beniers fan at all. But what do you think? I am a Jared McCann fan. These guys, by the way, are not free agents. They have term left on their deal. But a lot of people are thinking with Jason Botterill there, Bill Guerin and him being best buddies, that maybe there could be a match in some sort of trade.
Yeah, I'd say Seattle's another team, though, that I'd have to really take some time to look at what Beniers doesn't do a lot for me. McCann's a very different kind of player, though. It's not I don't think he's a game-breaking type guy. I don't think he's a superstar player. Pretty good player that could help somewhere in the middle of your lineup, but I don't think he's not a guy about whom I'd be amazingly excited.
Russo, how is covering the Florida defending their title different than covering the Wild? I mean, I think what it comes down to is, one, it is a different brand of hockey than really anybody in the league can play. Like, Carolina tries to play that style, but you need a certain mentality to play the style they do. You know what a good example is of how I hate the term bullies, and everybody's using it. And heck, I used it in a story the other day, and Brian Boucher uses it in a quote that I use tomorrow. But like they are. Like, how about when they went up 6-1 in Game 3, and that's when they decided, all right, now we're going to go after them. like it was no like we're taking our foot off the gas and we're going to let them go after the night. No, now Matthew Tkachuk is going to go stalk Sebastian Aho,
right. Send a message.
Yeah, and
he
Sam
did the
Bennett's
same thing against. He did
Blake.
the same thing against Jake Gensel in the Tampa series, where they had a game that the Tampa was up a couple, and he made sure he was going to send a message to Gensel to carry over for the rest of the series. I thought Rod Brendamore's quotes were really interesting after the series, where somebody asked him about his team and if they needed to change style, and he said, I think we play the same style they do. They just played it better than us.
Right, and have different personnel is, I think, also his point. That was Eric Engels that asked that question. The one thing I do like about covering Florida, besides their incredible practice facility, is just you go in the locker room and everybody is in there. Like, you have your pick of the litter of guys to interview, and that's something that, just based on the way that the Wild's practice facility is built with the elevator and all that stuff, it's just they escape, man. We don't get them on a regular basis. Charlie asks, and I kind of went back and forth on him, and this is kind of what I just said with Tage Thompson, is we need to sign a star, and sign was the key word here, not another 60-point guy that replaces Rossi. This team promised us a star after buyouts. Now they need to deliver. One, I don't remember them ever promising a quote-unquote star, and two, when you say sign a star, you're inventing players. There's no stars available in free agency this year, except for Mitch Marner, who we know the Wild, if they want to sign Kirill Kaprizov, are not going to be able to sign Mitch Marner.
And keep in mind that a star that they signed was Brock Faber. Mm-hmm. When they had this money coming off the books, they didn't know that they were going to have Faber at the number that he is right now. And it's a great contract. It's a great value, I believe, for Faber. But that was not in the cards. I mean, that came after the buyouts had happened.
And what also wasn't in the cards was maybe Kirill Kaprizov becoming a $15 million hockey player this offseason.
So that's another star that they've signed.
If Kirill Kaprizov signs a contract a day before Connor McDavid signs his extension, Kirill Kaprizov will be the highest paid player in the NHL temporarily, but that's just reality. And that's when you only have $16 million of cap space. That's just like, you can't make stuff up. Let's talk about just real quick. A lot of people are talking about Florida being and the Lightning, because they've gone to 6 straight Stanley Cup Finals. Just the benefit of being in a no state tax income tax state and the benefits that they get. And I'm not doubting that these teams, it is an advantage that they're getting guys to re-sign at less than would be their market value. But I also covered the Tampa Bay Lightning down there for years in the 90s when they were an absolute doormat. I covered the Florida Panthers from 97-05, but 95-05, but 97-05 before I left for here, where they didn't win a playoff round. And then that continued until 2020-22. Nobody wanted to play for the Florida Panthers. The reason why they are good right now is because of great ownership, management. Sure, location helps. Turning them into a first-class organization helps. But it's not helping the Seattle Kraken. Sure, Vegas, but Nashville, Dallas, yes. But it's not in every sport, too, that also have these advantages. So I guess my point, and Anthony, I want to know if you agree, is that for the history of these teams, 91 being the Lightning, I believe, 93 being the Florida Panthers, it's just recently, the last, the Lightning have had more sustained success. But these teams have not been destinations, and now they are, because they are winning, because they have great, creative, smart management, ownership that gives them the world. That is why they're winning. The state tax is just a benefit you add on to it.
There is a dollar value, for sure there is. But I've always argued that there are a myriad of factors why guys want to play someplace. Whether it be quality of life where they're moving, whether it be look at how many times we talked to people that said they'd love to play in Minnesota because they love the fan base here, they love living here in the summer, they'd love to raise their families here. Look at how many guys have ended their careers and wound up staying here. But what if Brad Marchand prefers to play in a cold weather city. Well, Florida ain't it. So, I mean, that's there are just some guys. Go back to Marion Gabrick leaving here, wanted to play in a bigger market. Well, there are there are guys who prefer to play in small markets. Now you're talking about guys that need to get out of Toronto because they don't want to play under the microscope. But think of how many guys have said their childhood dream was to play in Toronto. I mean, everybody's got different reasons for why they want to play someplace. And yes, the sheer dollar, there is a difference. There's no question. But most of the, and maybe that number is getting bigger just because by definition the cap's going up. So the number is getting bigger and therefore that percentage discrepancy is larger.
What's scary is like a team like Florida actually has a lot of cap space in the next couple of years.
Right, but what I was going to say is that I don't think that you'd have a ton of guys who that difference of let's just say it's $200,000-$400,000 over the course of a 5 or 6 year contract. I don't know how many times that's the final piece.
I think where it comes into play is there's no doubt that Bill Zito, when he's negotiating a contract, especially being the former agent he is not saying to guys like Sam Reinhart, look, let's do the math. All right, this team wants you. If they sign you to this contract, this is what you got to make there that compared to what you make here. Like that stuff happens, but the reason why Florida and Tampa have been so good is because they have great ownership, great management, and then it's like if you look at them, I mean, look at what he did. He makes a blockbuster trade, trading Jonathan Huberdeau and Mackenzie Weegar for Matthew Tkachuk. He gets Sam Reinhart for nothing. He gets Nico Mikkola for nothing. He plucks Gus Sportsling off things. Yes, they've become expensive players, but they grab him off waivers. They sign Everett Rodriguez to a cheap deal. Like he's made these great moves there, and it just shows you the value of having good.
Just because he had a few percentage points that he could offer guys that other people couldn't. Right. I mean that there, without a doubt, there are probably a couple players where that has been a piece of their strategy, at least a part of their decision making. But I think that if you start trying to say like this market has an unfair advantage over this market, that there are a lot of times where it's hard to put a dollar value exactly on that.
Yeah, I agree. A couple more, and then we'll wrap it up. Could the Wild and Hurricanes be a good trading partner for Rossi? I think yes. I think they are interested. Somebody asked, any chance Guerin would trade Juracek? After giving up a first, second, third, fourth, and a prospect, that would be, you're not getting that back. So I would think unlikely. How many players do you think are better than Kirill in the playoffs? Corn Dog asks.
That are still playing in the playoffs right now?
Yep. I mean, David
Draisaitl. That's Barkov is a different kind of player. Hard to make the comparison, but maybe 3 at max. Yeah, I'd say 2 for sure.
Again, it depends what you want. Mix of players. Like I'd take Carter Verhaeghe on my team at $7 million any day.
I would, but I wouldn't take him over Kirill Kaprizov.
No, but you know what I mean. Any chance the Wild move Spurgeon or Brodin this summer, Anthony? Your thoughts?
I'd say highly doubtful.
Yeah. Let's make this the last question of the podcast. Not Wild related, but it might be. John asks, any update on Jonathan Toews? So it came out this week, the Toews confirming a story by Mark Lazarus 2 or 3 months ago. But Pat Brisson has officially been given the green light by Jonathan Toews that he wants to come back and to begin talking to teams once I don't know if he's technically a free agent right now, if he's allowed to talk to teams or if he has to wait till July 1. A lot of rumors that he's just going to want to sign in Winnipeg. It makes a ton of sense. It's home. But I think that one thing, like I'd be very interested if the Wild would at least talk to him. But I think that those expect him after not playing 2 years to be the same Jonathan Toews. I mean, maybe he surprised us. I think it's absolutely worth a call, but I think that most likely he knows where he wants to play and probably.
Yeah, I would guess the same. And I mean, we're not talking about Jonathan Toews in 2015 where he was up there with the best players in the NHL.
Yeah. I'll be interested to see who the Wild, besides, like, say they do sign Brock Nelson. Is there anybody else? Do they go after a
a Corey Perry if he was available. Remember, they were interested in Perry before he got that crazy contract in Chicago. Like somebody like that's a winner. Guy's been to 5 Stanley Cup Finals in the last 6 years. Hasn't won one, though. But at least if he comes here, even if he doesn't win you the Stanley Cup, he'll get you past the first round. So there you go. All right. That is the show. Thanks, Anthony, for having me over, fresh off a plane.
For sure. Anytime, you're welcome.
Yeah, thanks to our incredible sponsors. Thanks for Margot for cooking dinner quietly in the background. Thanks to our sponsors, Aquarius Home Services, your local authorized dealer for Connecticut water treatment systems, Clamshell Beach Resorts, Giggly THC Beverages, Onyx, Maps, Twill in the Edina Galleria, and Royal Credit Union. Talk to you next week, everybody.
So much coming out, there's nothing going in. I know that you feel like you're never gonna win. Oh, but the world